everyone. Welcome back to Omkara Pathshala once again. I hope all of you and your family are safe and sound. Continuing with our real estate discussion, where we are very bullish. So we thought, after understanding the real estate industry from Knight Frank and Rock, why not also try and understand the real estate ancillary sector? So the one sector, of course, there is sanitary ware, there is electricals as well. But one sector which has been gaining a lot of strength in the last few years is the plywood MDF, industry. And Greenpanel, of course, has been one company which has been top of, this sector per se. So we invited today Vishwanathan Venkat Ramani ji. In short, Venkat, he says he loves to call himself Venkat. So Venkat sir, thank you so much for being here. Today you will be our guru to help us understand the entire industry. Before that, a disclaimer, which is very important, that we, Omkara Capital, have been very bullish on this industry. I personally own Greenpanel shares. My clients also, Omkara Capital clients also own these shares. We have been advising about this company, but we don't have any business liaison with Greenpanel. We have not worked anything in terms of any money or business transactions with Greenpanel. The effort here is to understand this industry so that we all benefit after learning from Venkat sir. Venkat sir, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you sir, my pleasure.
So sir, मैं हमेशा बोलता हूँ at the risk of sounding repetitive कि let's try to make this conversation as simple as easy with no jargons which my mom, your mom and everyone can understand. So आप हिंदी में, इंग्लिश में जैसे आपका मन करे बात कीजिए, but आप हमें प्यार से ये इंडस्ट्री समझा दीजिए. So before I give questions to Tejas and Ishrat, who are the more intelligent ones here than me, सर पहले तो ये समझाइए हमें कि जब हम इस इंडस्ट्री की बात करते हैं तो ये बहुत टर्मिनोलॉजीज जार्गन्स यूज होते हैं. MDF, प्लाईवुड, प्लाईबोर्ड, a lot of things, जैसे रैमको इंडस्ट्रीज अभी बहुत वो हाईलेक्स हाईसेम करता है. तो ये सब चीजें अलग अलग होती क्या है सर?
Okay, so I think in a broad way we can say we are part of the building materials group. And basically we are raw material suppliers to the furniture industry. Like if you look at the wood panel industry, it comprises of three main products, of which plywood is the largest, followed by MDF and particle boards. Now we estimate this industry size at around 25,000 crores, of which plywood has the lion's share at around 20,000 crores. And MDF and particle boards have almost similar market share at around 2,500 crores.
तो इसमें अंतर क्या होता है सर तीनों में? मतलब मैं अगर लेमैन लैंग्वेज में सोचूं, प्लाईवुड, MDF, प्लाईबोर्ड, तीनों में what are the characteristics in terms of usage which is different?
ये तीनों जैसे मैंने बताया ये वुड पैनल्स हैं. तो अगर आप तीनों की डिफरेंशिएशन अगर देखें तो it's basically in the manufacturing process. So जब plywood बनाते हैं, what we do is we make a circular cut on the trunk of the tree. Now the process is very simple, like sharpening a pencil when the wood comes out in rolls. So these rolls of wood are then assembled and cut together in sheets of 8 feet by 4 feet, and then assembled together with chemical resins in a hot press to form a sheet of plywood. Now, the other two products, MDF and particle board, have a different manufacturing process. So there, the wood is, broken up into small chips, and then these are blended with chemical resins. And again, there's a two-stage process. One is a cold press, and then the second is a hot press. So thereby, that gives it more durability. And the board shape is also uniform. Since the entire process is done with automatic machines, the wood goes in at one end and the finished product comes in at the other end. So labor involvement is very low. In fact, if you come to our Uttarakhand factory where we manufacture both plywood and MDF, तो पहले जब प्लाईवुड फैक्ट्री एंटर करते हैं तो आपको बहुत सारे लेबर्स दिखाएंगे जो प्लाईवुड को जो है मैन्युफैक्चर कर रहे हैं. जैसे ही MDF सेक्शन में जाएंगे आपको लगेगा कोई दूसरे कंट्री में चले गए हैं. क्योंकि एक बार जो है जो ट्रंक ऑफ द ट्री अंदर चला जाता है मशीन के अंदर, आपको फिर पूरा प्रोसेस कहीं कुछ दिखता नहीं है, फाइनली जब बोर्ड बाहर निकलता है वही दिखता है. तो प्रोसेस इज डिफरेंट. So plywood is manufactured in a labor-intensive environment. MDF and particle board are manufactured in automated plants. And India probably, because it's always had surplus labor. So we have always been a country which is, dependent on plywood. And again, MDF and particle board machines are not manufactured in India. So they have to be imported. So I think that's probably the reason why India has been primarily dependent on plywood. And in fact, MDF, although it has been there now for more than 3 decades, but I think as an industry, it started to develop around 2014 or 15. We entered the industry around 2010, when the size of the domestic market was about 150,000 cubic meters. And at that point, we set up a capacity of 180,000 cubic meters. So MDF started gaining market share, especially at the cost of the cheap plywood segment. And it has a market of around 2,500 crores pan-India.
Got it. Then we'll come to your company, sir. So one follow-up question. So when you say, when we talk to any industry person, do you club the MDF and the particular boards together?
Yeah, I think primarily because they are manufactured with different machinery, and the manufacturing process is also different.
Okay. So out of 25,000 crores, 20,000 crores will be plywood. And how should I differentiate 5,000 crores into particular boards and MDF?
I think more or less similar. Earlier, particle board used to have a larger share of around 3,000 crores. At that time, MDF possibly had a share of about 1,800 crores. So particle board has come down in recent years. So now both are together approximately around 2,500 crores each.
So what is the difference between the end application? I mean, we understand the manufacturing process is different, but ye use kahan hota hai and how is it different, plywood versus MDF and particle boards?
So plywood and particle boards are primarily used for furniture applications. MDF is also used for furniture applications. It also has different applications apart from furniture. So it's used to manufacture those, gift boxes which you receive during Diwali, jewelry boxes, shoe heels, then all those photo frames of gods and goddesses, then educational and sports equipments. So MDF has other applications apart from, furniture manufacturing.
Yeah, recently, very interesting. I was visiting a friend's home. They were doing the renovation, and very interestingly, they were using MDF for entire wood paneling of wherever they wanted to do PU. They have used MDF to a very large extent. So that's something which was very new for me to know actually.
Yeah, people who have knowledge of the product would prefer to use MDF because it has properties very similar to natural wood. You can use do a lot of carving and designing work with MDF, which you cannot do with plywood and particle boards. So that's where MDF has advantages over other products.
Sir, Venkat sir, एक क्वेश्चन है मेरे हमेशा दिमाग में आता है जब हम थोड़ा सा बड़ा पिक्चर देखें. We were listening to Abhishek Lodha of Lodha, and as I said, we also discussed with these 2 real estate consultants, Anna Rock and Knight Frank. So they mentioned that the real estate industry size in India is around 15 lakh crore.
Okay.
तो 15 लाख करोड़ में सर की and this is now, right? और हमारा जो इंडस्ट्री है which is an ancillary industry to real estate, we are only limited to only 25,000 crore sir. बाकी आप जैसे MDF का एप्लीकेशन बहुत अच्छा है, सब बहुत बढ़िया है, बट अभी तक हम इंडिया में सिर्फ 2,500 करोड़ पहुंचे हैं. So I just don't understand कि am I right to say this is very very small, or बाकी there is a huge opportunity waiting for us. Secondly, if I have to compare this with say other countries altogether, I'm sure which you might have data, how do we place as India? Because ancillary units इतनी ही छोटी होती है sir, 25,000 crore as a proportion of 15 lakh crore will be very, very small, right?
Yeah, that's correct. But like I mentioned, MDF started gaining recognition as a product from around 2014-15. So it's not been, present in India for a very long period of time. Plywood, has been there for much longer period. And overall, if we look at real estate, I think other products like cement and steel have a much larger proportion because they form the bulk of the exteriors. And, we are basically raw material suppliers for furniture manufacturing. So furniture manufacturing is basically associated with the interiors of the home or office, whatever, you may like to call it. So yes, it definitely forms a small part of the total real estate industry. And even if we look at furniture, I think probably today the furniture industry in India would probably be around 80,000 crores. These are very approximate figures because a very large part of the furniture industry is again with the unorganized segment. We have very, probably you can count the number on your fingers of organized furniture manufacturers in India. So I think, yes, we'll see major changes happening over the next 5 to 10 years in the furniture. So a large part of it should become organized. And when the industry gets organized, the share of MDF and particle boards will increase significantly. Because, when furniture industry becomes organized, there will be a lot of automation. Furniture will be manufactured in automated plants. And then plywood will not be a preferred raw material because plywood is manufactured in labor-intensive plants. So there are a lot of structural defects, core gaps inside the material. So I would say almost 90% of the plywood manufactured in India will not be a suitable raw material inside these automated furniture manufacturing plants. So as we see changes happening in the furniture industry, I think we'll also see changes happening on the raw material side. So the proportion of MDF and particle boards will increase significantly. And if we compare with Western countries, so the proportion of MDF and particle boards is about 80%, whereas plywood is about 20%. In India, the situation is reverse.
Wow.
So, although that same change may not happen in India, but probably we could reach a stage where MDF and particle boards would be about 50%, plywood the balance 50%. Plywood again in India can be divided into 3 broad segments. The premium segment dominated by organized companies. Then the mid segment, which is 30% organized, about 70% unorganized. And the cheap plywood segment, which is completely unorganized. So the premium plywood has a market share of 15%, the mid segment about 50%, and the cheap segment, the balance 35%.
Got it.
Now the cheap plywood segment is getting converted into MDF. We are gaining market share at the expense of that segment. So I think probably within the next 5 to 7 years, a large part of the cheap and the mid segment plywood will get converted into MDF.
So one thing which I learned is, I think this is very important, is that in the Western countries, you're seeing the proportion of plywood to MDF particular boards is 20-80, which is reverse in India.
That's correct.
Second thing which I wanted to learn from you is that from your talks, I understand that this change will also come into India, may not be at the same ratio of 80-20, but slowly 50-50, right?
That's correct.
If I talk about the industry size per se, sir, which is 25,000 crores. Now you want to only focus on the 5,000 crores, which is MDF and particular board, or you want to focus on the entire 25,000 crores. What is the kind of run rate? What do you see as an industry, going ahead in the next 4-5 years? Do you see that the growth rate for MDF particular boards will be much higher than the plywood? And if yes, then what could be the proportion that can the 5,000 crores basket go to particular boards, go to say 25,000 crores in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it could happen because, if you look at the growth over the past 3 to 5 years, plywood has been growing at about 3 to 4% annually. And possibly there was degrowth, during the last 2 years when there were a lot of lockdowns across the country. People were reluctant to allow carpenters into their houses to do the furniture. Whereas MDF has been, if you look at the last 5 years, I think probably MDF has been growing at a CAGR of about 14 to 15%. Although the growth rates in the initial years between 2010 and 2020 was much higher, where it grew at about 22 to 23%. But then that was on a very low base. So as the base is increasing, the growth levels is coming off. But yes, it's still growing at a reasonably fast pace.
And margins are also much better in MDF compared to plywood?
Yeah, the operating margins are significantly higher, but I think that's not the true way to look at it. I think we should look at a combination of operating margins, net profit margins, and the return ratios. So plywood, I would say probably the operating margins are significantly lower as compared to MDF. In our own case, our MDF margins would be around 25%. Plywood would probably be in a range of 12 to 14%.
Okay.
But then I think, overall, at the net profit margin level also, MDF would be significantly higher. But I think it would kind of balance out when we look at the return ratios because MDF is capital intensive. So the capital investment is significantly higher as compared to plywood.
Got it.
So, sir, what you're saying is, abhi plywood jo 20,000 crore market hai, out of which you said about 30-35% is low-end plywood, which is about 6,000-7,000 crores. So, as compared to the 2,500 crores existing market of MDF, there's an opportunity size of about 6,000-7,000 crores in the coming years. Basically, the MDF is going to cannibalize into the low-end plywood. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
And in terms of replacement, so the durability, the strength, how are the characteristics of plywood versus MDF? So everything that you can make in plywood, can it be made with MDF? Ke plywood ke liye there are specific kinds of furniture that only plywood can be made, can be used to make?
Okay. MDF can be used to manufacture everything that you can make with plywood. And like I mentioned, it also has other applications apart from furniture. Particle board has certain restrictions because the density of particle board is significantly lower as compared to plywood and MDF. So it can primarily be used for vertical applications and not for horizontal applications, where it would require significant load-bearing capacity. So particle board has restrictions in furniture usage, but MDF has no restrictions.
Sir, talking about the industry, chalo abhi industry pe aate hain, sir. What is the total size of the industry? But not you mentioned 5,000 crores, 2,500 crores each. But in unit terms, which is the CBM, cubic meter, what you say, right? So India में पूरा size कितना है? उसमें top के 3-4-5 players कौन-कौन है? अगर हम सिर्फ MDF पे focus करें, because Greenpanel का most of the business comes from MDF, right?
That's right. So if you look at the MDF industry, it's at the end of March 21, it was approximately between 1.8 to 1.9 million cubic meters. And we had 4 organized players and 7 unorganized players. The organized players had capacity of about 1.25 million cubic meters. The unorganized players had a capacity of 0.65 million cubic meters. So roughly, I would say a 65-35 ratio between organized and unorganized. But going forward, most of the capacity building will happen in the organized segment. So I think, yes, it will move towards a higher ratio, probably around 80-20 by the end of FY24 or FY25. So the key organized players are Greenpanel, Action, Century, and Rushil Decor, and like I mentioned, about 7 unorganized players currently.
तो आपका कितना percentage market share है sir? और second, third कौन होगा?
Okay, our market share in terms of capacity, we have a capacity of about 540,000 cubic meters currently. on approximately 1.9 million cubic meters, probably a 25-26% market share. And the next would be Action, which has capacity of approximately 4.1 to 4.2 410 to 420,000 cubic meters, followed by Rushil Decor with about 330,000 cubic meters, and Century with 2 lakh cubic meters.
तो Century इतना पीछे रह गया सर आपसे?
Century entered the industry at a much later stage. We entered the industry in 2010. Century probably entered around 2018. And so they have announced expansion plans recently. So they are going to do a brownfield expansion in their existing unit in Punjab, and possibly a greenfield expansion depending on availability of land in southern or northern India.
Got it. Okay, I think Ishra to Tejas.
So how is this capacity going, sir? I mean, right now you said it's about 1.9 million cubic meters, and you mentioned Century is adding capacity. What about the other players? Are we also adding capacity? Is Rushil, Action, any other players, and plus the unorganized guys also, are they adding capacities?
We are currently doing a brownfield expansion, which will expand our capacity by about 20%, take it up to 660,000 cubic meters. Century's brownfield expansion will probably be around 130,000 cubic meters, and then the greenfield expansion probably somewhere around 230 to 240,000. And Greenpanel also announced plans to set up a MDF capacity in Western India of approximately 240,000 cubic meters. Probably not much from unorganized. I heard of one more unorganized player entering the industry in the current year, so they will probably add another 100,000 cubic. So with all this capacity expansion, I think by the end of FY24 or FY25, we'll have capacity of somewhere between 2.9 to 3 million cubic meters.
So from 1.9 to 3 million.
Historically, how has this capacity grown, and how has been the share of unorganized players? Is it that it has recently increased because MDF demand is increasing, or historically also the unorganized players were about 30-35%? And how has been the capacity growth? Because now we see there's a lot of capacity coming for MDF because of the robust demand. So has that been the historical case as well?
Prior to 2010, I think there were only 2 MDF manufacturers in India with very small capacities. One was Mangalam Timber in Orissa. The other was a company called New Wood. I think the brand name was New Wood. The name of the company was something else. I don't recall right now. So their capacities were less than, I think Mangalam's capacity was around 54,000 and New Wood was probably around 60,000 cubic meters. So at that point of time, the industry was very small. The balance at that point of time used to come from imports. Over the next 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, the market expanded very fast, going up from about 150,000 cubic meters to about 1.2 million cubic meters. And most of the capacities came from the organized players like Greenpanel, Century, Action, etc. And during the last 3 years, we have seen organized players setting up capacities, primarily of second-hand Chinese plants, capacities ranging from between 50,000 and 100,000 cubic meters. And over the next few years, most of the capacities are expected to come from organized players.
Venkat sir, 2 questions mere se. One is that, as you mentioned, it's a capital intensive industry. So अगर मुझे 1 million cubic meter का प्लांट लगाना है तो कितना खर्चा होता है सर और कितना टाइम लगता है? एक चीज, और दूसरा, I think we were talking internally, Tejas, me and Ishrat, that in the last 3-4 years जो भी सारा कैपेक्स हुआ है आपके होम बिल्डिंग इंडस्ट्री में, चाहे वो सेंचुरी है, चाहे वो ग्रीन पैनल है या कोई भी है, everyone has put money only in MDF, not in plywood.
Yeah, there have been some small expansions in plywood, but then those don't really catch the public eye because, plywood capacities come at a low cost. Probably even if you put up a large capacity, cost will be around 100 crores, which does not really catch the public's eye. But yes, again, correct. Like since it has been growing at a very small rate of 3 to 4%, not many new capacities are coming up in plywood. So most of the new capacities are happening in MDF. And I think a lot of it is also due to the fact that we had high margins in MDF during the period from 2015 to 2018. So that encouraged a host of players to enter the MDF space.
What's the capex for 1 million cubic meter plant?
Yeah, asset turnover. So if you are manufacturing only the plain MDF, I think asset turnover would probably be 1 to 1.1, and with increase in value-added products, probably it could range somewhere between 1.3 to 1.4. So if you are investing about 1,000 crores and manufacturing just the plain MDF, I think probably your turnover would be somewhere between 1,000 to 1,100 crores. And if you are also over a period of time able to build a basket of value-added products, then probably you could get a top line of about 1,300 to 1,400 crores. So if you ask me what value-added products are, so within plain MDF, you have industrial MDF, which is the bread and butter product. And then you have value-added products like exterior grade MDF and club MDF, which are primarily used in areas where, flow of water is high, like in the kitchen or washrooms. And then you have value-added products like pre-laminated MDF and laminated flooring. So pre-laminated MDF is nothing but the plain board with a design paper pasted on one or both sides of the MDF sheet, so that the customer gets a factory finished product. Like if you are doing your furniture with plywood, you'll have to buy plywood and laminate separately, and then the carpenter will assemble the two and paste the laminate sheet on top of the plywood. So the cost would be much higher, and it would also be a labor-intensive process, so you might not get the desired level of finishing. With the pre-laminated MDF, since it's a factory finished product, the design, finish, everything is far superior to a plywood laminate combination, and it's also more cost-effective.
तो 1000 करोड़ में कितना लगता है प्लांट सर? आपने जब 1000 करोड़ बोला तो
1000 करोड़ हम just for ease of simplicity बताया, but I think yes, if you're building a capacity of about 360,000 cubic meters in current times, I think probably the cost would be around 500 crores.
Got it. Sir, sorry Tejas भाई, एक last question पूछता हूँ, then you can jump in. सर ये मुझे थोड़ा सा एंटी डंपिंग ड्यूटी, चाइना हुआ, इंपोर्ट ड्यूटी हुआ, ये सबका थोड़ा सा समझाइए, बिकॉज whenever we talk to anyone, some of the plywood guys, unlisted guys, वो हमेशा बोलते रहते हैं चाइना, एंटी डंपिंग ड्यूटी, कंटेनर प्राइसेस बहुत बढ़ गए हैं, तो थोड़ा सा काम खराब हो गया है. तो आपका इंडस्ट्री इन सब चीजों से किस तरीके से, हाउ इट इज लिंक्ड?
आई थिंक इंपोर्ट्स की बात करने से लोगों के मुंह में जो है चाइना का नाम ऑटोमेटिकली आ जाता है. जबकि इंडिया में एमडीएफ जो है चाइना से बहुत कम आता है, क्योंकि चाइना का खुद का डोमेस्टिक डिमांड इतना ज्यादा है कि वो हार्डली कोई लार्ज क्वांटिटी एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं. सो इंडिया में जो एमडीएफ आता है वो प्राइमरली वियतनाम, इंडोनेशिया एंड थाईलैंड से आता है. सो अर्लियर, prior to COVID, of the total of about when the market size was around 1.2 to 1.3 million cubic meters, imports constituted almost about 30% of the total market. Post-COVID, there has been a significant, fall in imports, and at this point of time, imports would be negligible. So earlier we had anti-dumping duty on imports from China, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Thailand, etc. So that was done in the initial phase, probably around 2012 or 13. And then, when anti-dumping duty was imposed on these countries, a lot of imports shifted to Vietnam and Indonesia, who are not exporting to India at that point of time. So later on in the second phase, anti-dumping duty was also imposed on imports from Vietnam and Indonesia. But again, all these anti-dumping duties were imposed only on the thick MDF because at that point of time, no one was manufacturing thin MDF in India. So it was only imposed on the thick MDF. So it had some impact, but then, not the full impact because they just change, the countries from, say, maybe China, Indonesia, China, Sri Lanka, Thailand, etc., to Vietnam and Indonesia. And again, anti-dumping duty is imposed on specific manufacturers in specific countries. So, people who are not covered in the first phase started exporting to India when anti-dumping duty was imposed on certain manufacturers in the first phase. So it has not been very effective, although it did give some support to the domestic industry.
आपको क्या फर्क पड़ता है सर? मतलब आप इंपोर्ट करते हो कि नहीं करते हो?
नहीं, इससे फर्क पड़ता था because those countries were exporting to India at very low rates. Initially, I think the price gap was about 15 to 80% in the thick MDF. And about 25 to 30% in thin MDF. Later on, when anti-dumping duty was imposed on thick MDF, the difference came down to about 10%. And during recent times, the difference in thick MDF has reduced further. It's now currently about 6 to 8% because raw material prices have gone up both on the wood side and the chemical resin side. And also logistic expenses have gone up significantly. So currently, although it's not very relevant because not much of imports is coming into India, but the price difference has also narrowed down significantly. And going forward, I think we won't see much of dumping happening into India for two reasons. One, international MDF prices have gone up significantly because of raw material price increases and increase in logistics costs. So earlier we used to export at around $200 per cubic meter. Now we are exporting at around $260, $270 per cubic meter. And second,
how much is the export for the company? How much is the export for the company out of total?
Last year, I think our mix was about 78% domestic and about 22% exports. And in the first quarter, I think it was about 68% domestic and about 32% exports. We increased exports significantly in the first quarter because the retail segment in India was significantly impacted by lockdowns. So that's the reason why we increased exports, and also because the margins also improved on the exports because of increase in prices. The second factor, I think, which will ensure that large volume of imports do not come into India is that a lot of furniture exports to the US and Europe have shifted away from China. So now countries like Vietnam and Indonesia are doing a lot of furniture exports to those countries. So their domestic MDF capacities are now being consumed, for their own furniture requirements. So that will also keep the volume of MDF imports to India low in the foreseeable future.
Got it.
Do we have any anti-dumping duty currently on thin or thick MDF? Is there any restriction?
At the moment, there's anti-dumping duty only on imports of thick MDF, and again, only from Vietnam and that again is only up to March 2022. So I think since Vietnam is not exporting to India currently, so that's almost irrelevant. What we are working with the government currently is imposition of countervailing duty on MDF imports into India. And I think probably the government will take a decision on that during August or September this year.
Hi Venkat, just one question from my end now. So today MDF ka apna profitability is about 25% in terms of EBITDA, right? So that implies ke
तेजस आवाज कम आ रहा है आपका.
So that implies के अगर हम 100 करोड़ का प्लांट डालते हैं 110-120 करोड़ का रेवेन्यू आता है उसमें 25% प्रॉफिट. So you are doing about 30 crores of EBITDA, and that implies कि आपका पेबैक पीरियड जो है कैपिटल का वो बेसिकली 3 साल हो गया है, 3 से 3.5 साल हो गया है. Now with such a shorter payback period, do you think there will be far more surplus capacity coming in both from the organized and the unorganized space?
Well, what are the entry barriers to the industry?
Yeah, I'll specify. So I think that happened only during 2018, and I think all the major players have learned the lessons. So I don't think we'll face that kind of situation again in future. And like you mentioned, there are entry barriers. So all these products, whether it's plywood, MDF, or particle boards, there's a primary cut happening on wood. So you require a license for manufacturing these products, and you require fresh licenses whether you're doing a greenfield or brownfield expansion. So it's a licensed industry in that fashion, and also there are entry barriers in the form of building up a distribution network. So you're not going to achieve top profitability by supplying only to the OEMs in India. So you have to build a broad-based distribution network pan-India, which will help you to have a wide circulation of the material and improve your realizations and profitability.
All right. Sir, one more question from my side, and that is that ये raw material sourcing जो होता है, ये plywood versus MDF में कितना अलग होता है? Because plywood में I know that people have gone to Gabon and places like that to set up facilities for veneer and all. Versus MDF, what is the difference in the raw material sourcing?
Okay, if we compare plywood with MDF, we use the same eucalyptus trees for both the products. And, like I mentioned, plywood is composed of layers of veneer. So the intermediate layers are called co-veneers. These are manufactured from the domestic plantation timber. And for the top layer, since you require a good finish, so we require what we call face veneers. These are imported from Myanmar, Gabon, and other countries. MDF, you don't require the face veneers since it's automated process. It's finished entirely by machines. So just the domestic eucalyptus timber is good enough for the entire process.
Right, sir. But what we are hearing, what we have heard is that you can plant a sapling and it is ready to harvest in 2 to 3 years, right, for MDF? That's
correct for MDF. Plywood, since you are making a circular cut on the trunk of the tree, so it has to be of a minimum girth. Basically, the volume of the plywood, the volume of the tree. So that would require a minimum growth period of about 6 to 6.5 years.
Right. Okay, got it. So therefore, MDF, I think raw material sourcing is much faster and much easier probably than the plywood.
That's correct.
Okay, got it.
Sir, अभी हम green panel पे आते हैं. I think we got the broader picture for India. We got the picture for plywood, MDF, particular boards, and thank you so much. I think आपने बहुत अच्छे से बहुत अच्छा clarity दे दिया. But मैं तो बार-बार यही सोचूंगा सर कि this 2,500 crores market size जो आज के time में MDF की है, I don't know कि सिंगापुर हुआ या I don't want to compare with the US or China कि उनका market size कितना बड़ा होता है. So whether this industry itself, because of the margins what this industry enjoys, and more importantly the characteristics of the product what is there, can this go to 10,000 crores in the next 2 or 3 years or not? I think that's a bigger question which I'll await later. But talking only about green panels sir now, please. So उससे पहले सर बहुत लोग कंफ्यूज हो जाते हैं वेंकट सर कि ये ग्रीन पैनल भी है, ग्रीन लैम्प भी है, ग्रीन प्लाई भी है. पहले ये तीनों कंपनीज के बारे में अलग अलग समझा दीजिए सर कि ये तीनों कंपनीज कैसे पैदा हुई और तीनों कंपनीज अलग अलग क्या क्या काम करती हैं.
So Greenply was the first company from the group. So we originally started with plywood manufacturing. We started with a small plywood unit in the state of Nagaland around 1987. And then we set up the second unit of the company around 1988 in Calcutta. And I think probably around 2005, the third unit of the company was set up in the state of Uttarakhand. In the interim period, we set up a laminate unit in Rajasthan around 1994. And during 2010, we set up 2 large units. One was a MDF unit in Uttarakhand and a laminate unit in Himachal Pradesh. So during 2014, we demerged the laminates business from Greenply, set it up as a separate listed entity called Greenlam, and a part of the promoter group moved to the new entity. And during 2019, we demerged the MDF business from Greenply, set it up under Greenpanel. And in that process, the plywood unit at Uttarakhand also came to us since Uttarakhand was an integrated unit for plywood and MDF. The plywood unit could not be separated physically. So that part also came to Greenpanel. So if you look at it, I would say we have 3 companies engaged in 3 different product categories. Greenply, which originally started with plywood, is now in plywood. Greenlam is manufacturing laminates and decorative veneers, and we are primarily into MDF, but we also have a share of plywood. And going forward, yes, those distinctions could probably get further blurred, because Greenply is also planning to enter into the MDF space in a couple of years.
तो इनके मैनेजमेंट अलग अलग है सर, लाइक ये क्या 3 भाई लोग हैं, कैसे हैं, मतलब हाउ इज द मैनेजमेंट एंड द बोर्ड डिफरेंट फ्रॉम दीस 3 कंपनीज?
Okay, the original promoters of Greenply were Mr. Shiv Prakash Mittal and his younger brother, Mr. Rajesh Mittal. Mr. Shiv Prakash Mittal has 2 sons, Saurabh and Shobhan, and Mr. Rajesh Mittal has 1 son, Sanidhya. So currently, Mr. Rajesh Mittal and his son Sanidhya are looking after the Greenply business. Mr. Saurabh Mittal, who is the elder son of Mr. Shiv Prakash Mittal, is looking after the laminates business of Greenlam. And Mr. Shiv Prakash Mittal and his younger son Shobhan are looking after Greenpanel.
Okay, got it. So it's all divided like in a family structure or what? Or is this the responsibilities which are given, or is it like कि आपका ये business आप ये संभालिए?
Yeah.
Family settlement or something?
Yeah, there was a family settlement when we segregated Greenply and Greenpanel. And yeah, I think by the end of this year, the shareholding structure will also get completely separated.
So no cross holdings.
So 3 parts of the family will be owning 3 different entities.
So no cross holdings, right? Among
No, there won't be any cross holdings.
So lovely. So let's jump to Greenpanel, sir, for what we are here, right? I think we thank you, Mukhi. This was a bigger clarity you gave on the entire group. So Greenpanel, we have been discussing, of course, MDF and a bit of plywood. Please tell us, sir, in your language about Greenpanel, ek bar, and then Ishrat and Tejas can jump on questions.
Okay, we had a top line of about 1,000 crores last year, of which about 785 came from MDF and about 215 crores from plywood. So roughly a 78-22 mix. And this year we are targeting about 1,400 crores of which MDF will probably do about 1150 crores and about 250 crores from plywood. And our future expansion, which will happen this year, that's also happening in MDF. So post the expansion, our capacity will increase from 540,000 to 660,000. And I think probably at peak, this should give us a top line of about 1,700 crores for the MDF business. And plywood with the existing capacity, we should probably do around 325 to 330 crores at peak.
And when do we expect that peak, sir? So this additional capacity, when will that be on floor?
The additional capacity should be ready in Q3 this year. So I think probably of the 660,000 capacity, we should be touching about 6 lakh cubic meters next year, about 5 lakh cubic meters in the domestic space, and probably another 1 lakh cubic meters for exports. And we should achieve peak capacity utilization in FY24.
Sir, mera
24 you are expecting MDF 800 to go up to 1700 MDF alone.
That's correct.
Okay.
तो सर मेरा सॉरी छोटा सा बेसिक क्वेश्चन है कि आपने वो लास्ट रियल एस्टेट साइकिल देखा होगा, राइट? बिटवीन 2004 टू 2008-9 का देखा होगा. I don't know if we can have any parallel, runways for your, wood panel industry. When the real estate cycle is strong, say if the real estate sales grows at say 20%, what kind of delta do you guys get, in that runway of the real estate industry? So everyone is thinking about that now. Maybe we are at the cusp of that real estate boom, which may come into India after a lull of 10-12 years. Is it a right question to think about? So when you have to say put any additional capacity, now we are talking about 6.6, right? But if the demand is higher, I'm sure you will go for JVs or you will do something, whatever needs to be done to have an additional capacity. So in the drawing room, boardroom, what do you think in terms of the parameters which tells you to put more capex, so that additional demand comes in? So one is the parallel to the real estate. If you can help us to understand. Second is, again, I am thinking about this 2,500 crores going to 10,000 crores in the next few years. So, but 6.6, I am sure it is not the end, right?
Yeah, that's right. So basically, we start looking at the trend. The first trend comes from the housing finance companies. When you start seeing their loan disbursements increasing, then you know that probably in the next 18 to 24 months you will see a lot of completed residents being handed over to the final residents, and that's when the demand for furniture starts. So basically, from the time we see a strong growth in housing finance disbursements, we feel that probably the demand will get strong over the next 18 to 24 months. So that was very easy for us to track, as far as building capacities in plywood was concerned, because in plywood you can probably have a plant up and running in about 12 months. But for MDF, where the cycle is much longer, probably takes you about 2 years or maybe 27 months from start to finish. So you have to start planning a bit more in advance. So basically, we take a view of how the demand is growing, what is our existing capacity utilization, how far are we close to optimum margins, what are our debt levels. So we consider all these factors before considering a new expansion. So I think we are pretty close to that. So I think probably in Q3 or Q4, we will probably take a call on the next expansion. And since we have a lot of land available in the state of Andhra Pradesh, so we have a total land area of about 200 acres in Andhra Pradesh, of which about 135 acres is currently utilized. So we could possibly plan to put up a new unit in Andhra Pradesh whenever we feel that the time is correct.
So did you get signs of these things, sir? Like, as you said, you keep an eye on the housing finance disbursals and everything. So are you seeing any signs of those in the last few months that things
I
are picking
think
up?
we are seeing, housing finance disbursements increasing over the last 6 to 9 months. So that phase has definitely started. But like I mentioned, it's not very relevant for MDF in particular.
Got it. So
Because you cannot plan on just that basis.
got it. Ishrat, am I correct? Sir said that we, as an industry, we will reach for 3 million cubic meter, right?
That's right. Close to 3 million cubic meters in
By
FY 24 or 25.
तो सर ये साइज दूसरी कंट्रीज में कितना होता है? If you can
Idea nahi hai, but मेरे ख्याल से multiple times. Whether we look at countries like China, Brazil, Chile, the capacities would be much larger. I don't recall the capacities in those countries, but there would be multiples.
I think I'd read China is like about 35 times the capacity of that of India. So it's relatively much larger. But
35 times.
Because, is this also because India में furniture import भी होता है? Because one तो एक ये है कि market is unorganized. 80-85% furniture market is unorganized. Plus, is it that furniture itself is imported where domestic manufacturers don't have to set up MDF capacity?
Good question.
So China is about 50 million, by the way. 50 million.
Online furniture retailing is a relatively new experience as far as India is concerned. Probably started over the last 3 years. So at present, volumes are quite small. So a lot of furniture is being imported from other Asian countries. But once this sector starts picking up in volume terms, then I think it will attract both domestic and international furniture manufacturers. IKEA has already started retailing operations in India. And I think possibly they will get into manufacturing over the next 3 years. So when players like IKEA or other large domestic players enter furniture manufacturing, and people realize that most of this furniture is being manufactured with MDF, I think a lot of misconceptions around MDF will also get removed. At present, you have a lot of vested interests, primarily on the carpenter's side, where if they are using MDF, their labor costs and margins, which are calculated as a proportion of the raw material costs, are much lower if they use MDF, vis-a-vis plywood. So they have a vested interest in promoting plywood at the cost of MDF. But once people start realizing that MDF is as good a product as plywood and significantly cost effective, then they would start demanding furniture made from MDF from the carpenters. So we are already seeing that trend visible in southern parts to a very large extent. Northern India also, the trend has started over the last couple of years. So I think that trend will also catch on the other zones.
Venkatji, focusing on your financials now. So you said this year you would be targeting about 1100 crores, and maybe we can do 1400 next year and 1700 the year after, right? So when you add it up, it's about 4,200 crores revenue over 3 years. And at a 25% EBITDA, that's about 1,000 crores of EBITDA. Okay. I'm just doing some basic math over here. If you take about 80% cash flow, operating cash flow generation from this, that's about 800 crores.
I think there's been a misunderstanding somewhere. So if I say a top line of about 1,700 crores from MDF, that would mean an EBITDA of around 400 odd crores at 25%, not 4,000.
No. I'm saying 3 years together, joint, FY 20
Okay.
2024, total.
Okay.
Okay, so no, my only point was that if you have about 750-800 crores kind of a cash flow generating in the next 3 years from the MDF business, and your current say gross block is about 1500 crores. So it's kind of you can add 50% more capacity, right, to your current MDF capacity of 660,000. So potentially by FY 24-25, you will hit like a 1 million cubic meter. Is it possible?
Yeah, I think that's possible. Although we would take a decision on expansion based on a variety of factors, our view of how the market will perform over the next 4 to 5 years, and also whether we are able to extract the optimum from the existing capacities, and also the overall debt levels of the company. So I think we'll be comfortable on the debt side. Debt should see a significant reduction over FY 22 and 23. So I think, yes, we'll be in a comfortable position to finance future expansions.
Yeah, and a similar question over here. So I think at a 25% EBITDA, your future capacities can be done basically from internal cash flows. Don't need net. You won't.
Yeah, I think, yes, most of the expansions could happen from internal accruals, although we are not averse to adding some small amount of debt if required at any point of time.
Yeah, then it may be healthy, because if you're doing 17-18% ROCEs versus a cost of capital of 11-12%, then probably some amount of debt is good to have on the balance sheet.
That's correct.
सर, पर मैं तो ये सोच रहा हूँ, जैसे आपको पैसे का जरूरत नहीं है एक्सपेंशन के लिए, 3 साल में पे बैक पीरियड होता है, जैसे तेजस ने भी समझाया कि आपका 700-800 करोड़ का कैश फ्लो जनरेट हो सकता है अगले 3 साल में. सो और whatever numbers we're talking about in the past record, जैसे आपने बोला 24-25% मार्जिन्स बन जाते हैं. So I think 2 साल में कंपनी कैन इजीली डू 200 करोड़ का प्रॉफिट, राइट? So everything is sounding very good. What can go wrong? What can go wrong?
जो तेजस जी बोल रहे थे कि 3 साल का पे बैक होता है, वो एक्चुअली 3 साल नहीं होता है, क्योंकि हम पैसा इन्वेस्टमेंट उसके 2 साल 2.5 साल पहले से चालू कर देते हैं. So I think overall it takes about 5.5 years for a payback, and in case there were situations where business is impacted due to lockdowns, it could add another year or so to the payback period. But yes, I think earlier, since our size was relatively small, we were taking on higher levels of debt. But the promoters are basically conservative. So yes, future expansions will happen with a much lower volume of debt.
नहीं, वो ठीक है सर, but I'm just trying to understand कि what can go wrong. I understand that अभी मेरे ख्याल में debt equity ratio is what, 0.6 around. So going ahead, in the cash flows, in the next 2 years or 3 years, you can almost be debt free if you want to be, depending on whatever debt equity ratio you want to enhance your capacity. So as I said, numbers जो सुन रहे हैं, जो इंडिया में ग्रोथ हो रहा है MDF का, everything is looking rosy to me कि चलो यार इतना हो जाएगा. आज आपके 2-2.5 करोड़ मार्केट कैप पे you can generate 700-800 करोड़ का कैश फ्लो in the next 3 years. What can go wrong with this industry, sir? क्योंकि अभी कोविड एक चीज है, वो सबको मालूम है, अगर हो गया तो आपका नहीं हमारा भी सबका ही काम बंद हो जाएगा या रुक जाएगा थोड़े टाइम के लिए.
I think the only thing which would keep me worried is possibly, the domestic demand. As long as domestic demand is good, we can pass on cost increases. We can achieve higher levels of capacity expansion, have a reasonably short payback period. So all those factors are positive. So I think, yes, the only thing which would worry me will be if there's a big fall in the domestic demand.
How important is the logistics cost for you?
It's important to some extent, but with 2 plants, one in northern India, which services the northern and eastern zones, and the south plant services the southern and western zones. So we are able to keep the freight costs within 6 to 7%.
Got it. And technology-wise, I'm sure, as you said, it's very difficult for anyone to enter into this business, right? मैंने वो देखा था, I don't know वो है कि नहीं, वो Reliance वाले का भी आता है सर, एक बार उनका भी कुछ laminate था Reliance का. I don't know whether you saw those advertisements.
Yeah, I saw that. I've been seeing that. I think now for more than 2 years or 3 years.
वो लोग कुछ कर रहे हैं कि नहीं
But
कर रहे हैं?
nothing much is visible in the market.
अच्छा.
And I think it's a different product. It's not MDF. I think they have given it some other name. I don't recall it instantly. But it's a different product. It's not MDF.
Sir, is there any very stupid question to worry कि यार अभी जिस तरीके से हम बोल रहे हैं MDF only 20% है, plywood 80% है, बाहर वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज में ये उल्टा होता है, that 1-2 साल में लोग MDF को भूल जाए या कुछ ऐसा कुछ नया आ जाए, बोलेंगे यार ये क्या हो गया, कि प्रोडक्ट ही चेंज हो जाए, something new comes in with technological innovation or something, and we say कि हमने तो पूरा कैपेक्स लगा दिया MDF पे और एकदम इंडस्ट्री में कुछ नया आ गया. Is that वो जीरो पॉसिबिलिटी ऐसा कुछ?
नहीं, मैं जीरो पॉसिबिलिटी कभी नहीं बोलूंगा, because lot of products in the past, which were
I think Tejas
virtually monopolistic products have vanished completely. So I won't say there's a zero possibility of any new product, but yes, the possibility of a new product being cost competitive as compared to MDF, I would say that's very low.
Sir, a related question. हम देखते हैं कि these days people have also started using cement boards, cement fiber boards in the furniture application, and then you have got say aluminium enclosures with glass or acrylic sheets. So a lot of innovative material is out there available, which is willing to replace on a plywood, MDF, and all of that.
Yeah, you have those white cement boards, but they're not very cost effective. So, they would be much more costly as compared to MDF, and they have limited applications also. Basically, they're used for false ceiling applications currently, not much of furniture manufacturing applications.
ये सारे जो HIL करता है या दूसरी हैदराबाद इंडस्ट्रीज जो हुआ या दूसरी करते हैं, विशाखा करता है, ये सारे के सारे वो छत पे करते हैं, घर के अंदर कुछ नहीं होता उसका सर?
नहीं, घर के अंदर भी यूज करते हैं, फॉल सीलिंग वगैरह में एप्लीकेशंस यूज होती हैं, बट लिमिटेड एप्लीकेशंस है, नॉट फॉर द वाइड वैरायटी ऑफ फर्नीचर एप्लीकेशंस लाइक से प्लाईवुड और MDF हैज.
तो आपने अभी तक कोई देखा है सर कि इज देयर एनी प्रोडक्ट व्हाट यू थिंक यार ये कहां से आ गया, तो ये कुछ इंडस्ट्री को थोड़ा सा डिस्टर्ब कर देगा? Has there been any technological innovation?
नहीं सर, अभी तक ऐसा कुछ नहीं देखे हैं जो कि लगता है कि प्लाईवुड और MDF को रिप्लेस कर देगा.
So that's an important thing because otherwise demand का, जैसे मैंने आप बोल रहे हो कि demand pickup हो ही रहा है after whatever 8-10 years in the real estate industry, which is good. Most of the people who are talking about the industry, we are seeing how the trend is changing in most of the cities, which is good. So I think real estate is one earlier indicator to see whether the demand is picking for you or not, right?
That's correct.
How much will be the industrial and residential portion of your sales?
MDF, we don't have very accurate figures, but our internal estimate is that about 65 to 70% would be commercial and retail, possibly about 30 to 35% residential.
Got it. तो सर आपने प्लाईवुड वाला क्यों रखा हुआ है? आई डोंट अंडरस्टैंड दिस थिंग, मगर जब आप MDF पे इतना बुलिश हो और प्लाईवुड आपका वो जो बड़े भाई साहब है वो कर रहे हैं, वो ग्रीन प्लाई वाले कर रहे हैं, तो ठीक है, बट व्हाई टू हैव इवन एक्स्ट्रा कैपेसिटी फॉर प्लाईवुड व्हेन यू नो कि वो 4-5% ग्रो करेगा?
ठीक है, से इट्स basically a cash generating operation. We are not spending anything, it's adding to the EBITDA and cash flows. So we are operating, and it's probably the most cost optimized unit in the entire Greenply family.
Got it.
So we are continuing to.
So does size help?
It works, sir. Mostly south में consume होता है, because obviously our plants are in the north and south. So is it that south में ज़्यादा consume होता है? West, east में क्या situation? So how is the demographic breakup for consumption?
Almost 45% of our MDF is consumed in South India, about 35% in North India. West and Central together about 15%, and East and Northeast the balance 5%.
सर हाउ मच इज द वॉर चेस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट साइज? मतलब कल को सेंचुरी प्लाई बोले कि बस मैं 5 मिलियन क्यूबिक मीटर लगा रहा हूँ, या एक्शन वाला भी अनलिस्टेड है, आई एम श्योर दे विल आल्सो कम विद एन आईपीओ, वो बोले मैंने 1000 करोड़ रेज कर लिया, मैं प्लांट लगाता हूँ, you know. So in the, abhi to we are the largest, right? Greenpanel is the largest right now. So do you think that if the competition gets tough, you know, it can be a disadvantage for the company?
नहीं, मेरे ख्याल से उस हिसाब से जो है एक साथ जो हुआ था वो एक बार हुआ, वो बार बार रिपीट होगा बोल के लग नहीं रहा है. I would say it's probably an accident which happened once. You know, possibly because new players wanted to enter the industry, and the existing ones also felt that it was a favorable product to expand in.
What is this accident you're talking about? Sorry.
In 2018, you know, we set up the Andhra Pradesh plant with a capacity of 360,000 cubic meters. Century set up their Punjab plant with 2 lakh cubic meters.
Achha.
And Action added another 200, I think about 230 or 240,000. So जो country का capacity था वो साल भर के अंदर 2.5 गुना बढ़ गया. So I think that's not something which will happen, you know, again in future. So possibly expansions will be, you know, broken up over time periods. And even if you look at the next 3 years, so although I'm saying that we'll probably see addition of another 1 million cubic meters with growth rates of about 14 to 15% annually, a large part of that would be consumed within that period.
तो अगर अपना सप्लाई
यूटिलाइजेशन लेवल्स अभी
एक सेकंड, अगर अपना सप्लाई 3 मिलियन क्यूबिक मीटर होगा सर, राइट, इंडस्ट्री का अगले 2 साल में,
राइट,
और डिमांड आपके हिसाब से इतना है?
हम मोटामोटी जो है, if you look at FY21, I think domestic capacities were utilized around 75 to 80%.
Okay.
And I think probably by the end of FY25, we should again have a 80 to 85% capacity utilization.
So supply glut is not in the question mark.
नहीं लग रहा है, अभी तो नहीं लग रहा.
और आप हो भी वैसे 3 भाई लोग ही हो सारे के सारे सर, सेंचुरी, ग्रीन पैनल, बाकी जान पहचान के सारे एक्शन, सो 3 लोग ही हो आप, राइट?
एंड रुशील डेकर,
हाँ, which is very small.
नहीं, रुशील का भी अभी साइज बड़ा हो गया है, क्योंकि करंट ईयर में उन्होंने 2,40,000 क्यूबिक मीटर कैपेसिटी एडिशन किया है, तो अभी उनका भी कैपेसिटी 3,30,000 हो गया है. So they are also a reasonably sized player now.
Got it. Sir,
Venkatji, two questions from my side. One is, how much land is available? आपके पास land कितना अभी available है to expand the capacity?
आंध्रा में हमारे पास टोटल लैंड एरिया 200 एकड़ है, तो एग्जिस्टिंग प्लांट में करीब 130-35 एकड़ यूटिलाइज होगा, तो करीब 65 एकड़ बाकी होगा हाथ में.
Okay, great.
So we can put up another capacity of 360,000 easily.
So that will come at a lower capex, right? मतलब land cost already.
It will come at a lower capex, yes, because we won't require land. Initially, we also had to spend a lot on land development, to have a smooth layout. And then also we will not probably require to add on some supporting equipments. So yes, the future expansion will not have a similar cost.
And sir, second question, what's your thoughts on adding capacity in the west, say Gujarat, which is so close to the port? Probably makes a lot of sense from an export point of view. What's your sense there?
Yeah, it's good because I think we could also see the domestic markets expanding on the western side, and like you mentioned, it's close to both Kandla and
Mundra.
Mumbai ports and Mundra also.
Yes.
So yes, that also gives opportunities for exports.
सर अगर 5 साल में 10 मिलियन हो सकता है इंडस्ट्री?
5 साल में 10 मिलियन नहीं सर, नहीं लग रहा, लग नहीं रहा है.
इतना डिमांड नहीं है सर,
क्योंकि हम 3 साल में और 1 मिलियन की बात कर रहे हैं.
हाँ.
तो 5 साल में 10 मिलियन तो आएगा नहीं।
Okay, you're saying demand is not that big, right? मगर 2 मिलियन पे 2,500 करोड़ का इंडस्ट्री है ये, राइट? मोटा मोटा 1.9 पे 5
नहीं, 1.9 यूटिलाइज नहीं है मेरे ख्याल से। लास्ट ईयर अबाउट 1.45 मिलियन क्यूबिक मीटर्स होगा।
सो 1.5 जो है अभी 2,500 करोड़ का इंडस्ट्री है, आपने 3 मिलियन लेते हैं और आपने बोला कि हाँ भाई यूटिलाइजेशन सम 80% हो जाएगा, राइट?
राइट।
सो अगले 3 साल में द इंडस्ट्री साइज कैन ग्रो फ्रॉम 2,500 crores to 5,000 crores.
It will cross that.
It will cross that.
क्योंकि रियलाइजेशंस भी काफी इंप्रूव हुए हैं। तो उस समय जो है करीब 20,000 का रियलाइजेशन है, अभी 25,000 का रियलाइजेशन है, तो डबल से ज्यादा ही होगा।
Got it. Great. सर ये इंडिया और बाहर में क्या डिफरेंस होता है प्राइस का? जैसे आपने बोला जो MDF ग्लोबल प्राइसेस है, they have increased I think from $200 to you said 250 to 60, right? Is the same?
So currently yes.
नहीं तो इंडिया में भी ये जितना डिफरेंस ग्लोबली होता है सर, इंडिया में सेम चलता है?
मतलब जो प्रोडक्ट एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं उसका अगर प्राइसेस कंपेयर करते हैं तो अगर इंडिया में समझ लीजिए 22,000 है तो इंटरनेशनल में 19,500-20,000 है।
Got it. तो बाहर वालों को सस्ता बेचते हो आप हमसे?
वो तो इंटरनेशनल प्राइसेस तो हम अकेले डिटरमिन नहीं कर सकते ना। जो कॉम्पिटिटर्स जिस प्राइस में एक्सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं हमको भी वही प्राइस में करना पड़ेगा।
So Venkat ji, is it fair to assume that the industry can grow at about between 1,000 to 1,500 crores every year for the next say 7-8 years, 10 years? Because see, we are saying from 2,500 crores we are going to 5,000 crores in 2 years. That's about 1,250 crores addition each year, right? अगर हम 1,000 करोड़ भी पकड़े हर साल तो we are going to grow pretty sizably. About 10-12,000 करोड़ का मार्केट हो जाएगा in the next 10 years.
डिपेंड करता है कि इंपोर्ट्स का क्या फ्यूचर रहता है। अभी तो लगता नहीं कि ज्यादा इंपोर्ट्स आएगा, क्योंकि जैसे मैंने बताया वियतनाम और इंडोनेशिया फर्नीचर एक्सपोर्ट्स में चले गए हैं, तो ज्यादा नहीं है। तो अभी शायद थोड़ा बहुत कैपेसिटी थाईलैंड में ही एक्स्ट्रा होगा, वो भी अभी इंडिया में करंटली नहीं आ रहा है ड्यू टू लॉजिस्टिक इश्यूज। तो मेरे ख्याल से फ्यूचर में भी ज्यादा जो है आना नहीं चाहिए इंपोर्ट्स। तो बेसिकली जो डोमेस्टिक कैपेसिटीज है उसके आसपास ही मार्केट साइज भी रहना चाहिए।
तो हम तो यही सोच रहे थे सर बार बार कि 15 लाख करोड़ का मार्केट है, जो everyone whoever we talk to, as I said, लूदा हुआ, DLF हुआ, किसी से बात करते हैं, they are saying कि अगर इंडिया का GDP 6-7% ग्रो करता है तो there is an opportunity that the real estate industry खुद यहाँ से बढ़ के $1 trillion हो सकती है, so from $300 billion to $1 trillion, तो 3 गुना हमारा इंडस्ट्री हो सकता है उनके हिसाब से, जाके रियल एस्टेट इंडस्ट्री हो सकता है अगर जीडीपी उतना ग्रो करता रहता है, क्योंकि डिमांड आता रहता है, सिंपल सी बात है। उसी हिसाब से अगर वो होता रहता है सर, तो आपका जो इंडस्ट्री है 25,000 करोड़ जो अम्ब्रेला इंडस्ट्री है और उसके अंदर 3 हिस्से हैं, तो आई एम जस्ट सरप्राइज दैट इफ द बिगर बास्केट इज सो बिग, दिस इंडस्ट्री विल रिमेन 5,000 करोड़, मतलब एमडीएफ की बात कर रहा हूं अभी मैं, 5,000 करोड़, 10,000 करोड़, 20,000 करोड़, जैसे इशरत ने बताया कि चाइना में तो 30-35 टाइम्स हैं अपने से, राइट, कैपेसिटी। सो ठीक है कि उसको टाइम लगेगा, मैं ये नहीं बोल रहा हूं आज हो जाएगा, 5 साल 10 साल लगेगा उसको, बट इट ऑल्सो डिपेंड्स ऑन द डिमांड से कि उतना डिमांड आता रहे, कि सैनिटरी वेयर का कितना होगा तेजस भाई, लाइक हाउ मच?
सो टाइल, सिरेमिक्स, सैनिटरी वेयर सब मिला के अबाउट 30-35,000 करोड़।
सो सैनिटरी वेयर इंडस्ट्री भी सर इंडिया में 30-35 हजार करोड़ है। जब हम बजारिया, सोमानी इनकी बात करते हैं तो आपका इंडस्ट्री भी अभी 25,000 करोड़ है, और इज इट लाइक कि दीज इंडस्ट्रीज आर फॉर, जब रियल एस्टेट साइकिल चलता है तो 2-3 साल पैसा बना लो, फिर शांति से वापस आ जाओ।
I think probably cement and steel have a much larger share in real estate because their proportion as a part of the total construction cost is much higher than the interior products. So I think that difference will always remain. But
so अपना कितना सर, अपना 25,000 करोड़ डिवाइडेड है 15 लाख करोड़,
हाँ,
तो हम लोग क्या कितना हुआ तेजस? 1% भी नहीं है, मतलब उससे कम होता है कंजप्शन लाइक
नहीं, करीब 1.5% हुआ क्या?
हाँ हाँ 1.5% हुआ।
नहीं, much more than that, 15%.
नहीं सर,
अरे नहीं भाई,
15 लाख करोड़ बोल रहे हैं ना।
Oh, 15 lakh. Sorry.
हाँ, तो 1% 15,000 हो गया तो करीब 1.5 हो गया, समझ लीजिए।
हाँ, तो डेटा हो गया, तो मतलब 70% लैंड होता है, चलो मानता हूं मैं, तो लैंड का निकाल दो, फिर रियल एस्टेट, सॉरी सीमेंट हुआ, स्टील हुआ, सैनिटरी वेयर हुआ, तो हम कोई चीज बनाने लग जाए तो हर चीज में, सर हमने ऑफिस बनाया तो हर चीज में वो प्लाईवुड, और पहले तो सबसे उसका खर्चा सबसे ज्यादा आता है, एमडीएफ का खर्चा ज्यादा आता है, कुछ भी चूज करना हो तो।
So Varinder, my understanding is that on an average 15 to 20% is the cost of renovation when you buy any empty place. 15 से 20% आप पकड़ के चलो, उसका is divided into furniture, paints, electrification, pipes, sanitary ware, tiles, whatever it is. I think plywood will be about a third of it, about probably.
सर इतना ही होता है आपके हिसाब से वेंकट सर? 1.5-2%
हो सकता है, possibly yes.
Okay, got it. नहीं ठीक है सर, because honestly I have asked all the questions which I wanted to ask, and you were much more lenient to us in terms of answering कि हमारे मन में जो भी है आपसे पूछ लिया सर। आपका मेरी तरफ से बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। इशरत, तेजस भाई, अगर आपके पास क्वेश्चंस और हैं प्लीज।
Oh, I am largely done.
I think I'm done.
No sir, आप वेंकट सर, because you were a pleasure and a great human being to help us explain each and everything. You didn't only cover Greenpanel as a company. I think you explained us beautifully about the entire industry, और हम लोग कहाँ चले गए, इंडिया में चले गए, चाइना में चले गए, वियतनाम में चले गए, थाईलैंड में चले गए। आपने बहुत अच्छे से चीजें समझाई सर, आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। थैंक यू सो मच सर, आप आए आज और हमारे गुरु बने।
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you sir, my pleasure.
It was a great learning session, sir. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you sir.